What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be teaching you how I make these simple yet effective natural earthly bases. Alrighty guys, welcome to today's video where we are going to be making this simple yet effective earthly sort of neutral base, and this base will go with pretty much any model, any color scheme. In my opinion, it's kind of like a very nice neutral base if you're stuck for ideas. You haven't got a specific theme, say if you're not doing anything really sort of far out like a lava or anything like that. I've got a range of models here. As you can see, we've got this High Warden from the Lumineth Realm Lords. Comes with like a scenic stone base. Same thing on here with the same coloured tufts, same paint scheme. We've also got this Legolas here on a smaller base. He's on a 25mm round where the others are on 32s. And we also have this Space Marine Librarian, all using the exact same colours that I'm about to show you in today's video, all using the same grass tufts. And as you can see, all these miniatures are in sort of different colour schemes. You know, we've got the different base sizes and the completely different styles of miniatures, and in my opinion they all look great. So let's jump into it and I'll show you how to make these bases. Alrighty guys, so before we jump into the actual making of the base today, we're just going to quickly run through all the materials that we're going to be using in order to make these bases. So first things up, and most important, is the base or the miniature that you are going to be making this base for. Now I just have a plain 32mm round base here, but if you've already got a miniature attached to a base, don't panic, because that is usually what I would do with mine. For example, this Lurch here, he's already built and attached to the base before I started to do this process, and he's undercoated as well. So what I would recommend is to build your miniature in all the sub-assemblies that you are happy with, attach him to the base, and then undercoat him as you normally would. Just for the tutorial purposes, I'm going to be using a plain base. So again, if your miniature is already attached to a base, don't panic. That's usually what I would do. Alrighty, so the second thing that I'm going to be using is this Citadel texture spreader. You can use anything to sub this in for, such as like an old beat up paintbrush or anything like that. But this is going to be able to apply our next thing with, which is a texture paint. Again, using Citadel Sterling Mud here, you could sub this out for anything that you prefer, like AK Interactive sort of muddy textures, anything like that. But for my purposes, I use the Citadel Mud. We're also going to have 4 paints. Again, you can sub any of these in for what you would prefer to use, but this is what I personally use to make these bases. We're going to use Zandri Dust from Citadel Colour. This is kind of like your natural, like earthy, bony kind of colour. We have Ulthuan Grey, which is a off-coloured grey. It's like a near white, not quite a white, not quite a grey. It's like that nice in between. I also use Scale 75's white. Again, you can just sub that in for any old white. And I also have Scale 75 black. These are the paints that we're going to be using. These 3 here are for the top of the base, and the black you could sub in for this is what I'm going to use for the rim of the base. So you could sub that in for anything, say if you wanted to have them brown or blue or red, whatever the color the lip of the base, which is this section around the edge here, you could sub that color in for anything else you wanted. We're also going to be using a medium dry brush for today. Obviously your dry brush is going to be scaled depending on the size of the base that you're working on. For example, if you are using like 25 or 32mm bases like this, or like Lurch over here was on, he's on a smaller 25mm base. You're going to be using a small or medium dry brush. If you're painting anything large, say it's like a dreadnought or any kind of like tank on a base, anything like that, like a chariot sized base, then obviously you're going to want to switch that up for a larger dry brush. So we're just going to pop Lurch out of the way. So we have our dry brush. Last thing that we're going to be using, and this again you can swap out for anything you want. I've got Army Painter Winter Tufts here, and this is just to add a bit of depth and fanciness to our base. So that's everything that we're going to be using. Like I said, it's nice, simple and effective, and let's get into making our base. Okay, so now that we've been through all of the tools that we're going to be needing to build this base, let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my base and I'm going to pop it into this paint holder here. It's not something you need, but just for ease of being able to show you the base as we're going, I'm just going to pop one in there. We're going to take our texture paint. We've got our Citadel Sterling Mud. Give that a little bit of a shake just to make sure that it's all in the lid. And we're going to be using our texture spreader. I'm going to be using the big side here because obviously we've got a lot of surface area to cover. And what we're going to do is just be nice and liberal with our approach and not worry too much. And just get that on there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to be spreading it. Make sure that we take it to all the edges of the base and just make sure we get a nice thick coverage. Now what you can do is you don't want to make sure that this is like completely flat. You just want to have sort of some raised areas in parts and more spread out in others, and then that way you get less of an even texture, and you can make this sort of as bumpy or as flat as you would like. It all depends on the sort of style that you're going to go for. What we're going to do is just make sure that we take our texture paint and cover the entirety of our base. Now if you're miniature, as we said before, I would usually glue my miniature to the base and spray paint him, undercoat him before doing this step. If you do have a miniature on the base, just maybe when you get towards the feet, swap to the smaller side, or if you're using old brushes, use a smaller brush and just be careful not to get this on the miniature. But if you do by accident, don't worry too much, you can just wipe it away before it dries. So there we are, step one. Just going to take our base and cover it with our texture paint, just like this. So we've got some areas that have got sort of bigger pools of texture than others, and then as you can see, when it's sort of like, when you're looking at it from this angle, it's all lumpy and bumpy. So with that step down, what we can do is we're going to leave that to dry. That will take around sort of 15 minutes to about half an hour. Obviously, the more you've put on, the longer it's going to take to dry, but just wait till it's completely fully dry, and then we're going to come back and get that painted. Alrighty, so I've left this to dry for about 40-45 minutes now, and that's completely dried, which is nice. As I said before, it does take about 15 to 30 minutes for it to start drying, depending on how much you've put on. But you know, it's better safer than sorry. Leave it longer if need be, because we're going to start painting now, and if it was still wet, then it's going to be no good to us. So first colour we're going to be jumping in with is Zandri Dust. We're going to be using a dry brushing technique, which means we're going to need a little bit of paper towel. And what we're going to do is we're going to be taking some paint onto our dry brush, and we're going to be wiping all the excess paint away. So we're going to be wiping probably about 90-95% of the paint off of the brush and onto our tissue paper. And then that way we can use just the tip of the brush to catch all of the raised edges, so to speak. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our dry brush, we're just going to catch the top of the paint. We don't want too much on there, and then we're just going to work it into the bristles, wipe about 90-95% of that paint off, and then I'm just going to test it on the back of my hand just to make sure it's not coming off too heavy, which is fine. And then what we're going to do is just in big sweeping motions just gently go across the top of the mud there, and then what we'll be doing is catching all of the raised edges. And what we'll do is we'll start off, don't want to press down too hard, and as you can see we're just gradually building that colour up. And this will provide us the foundation for our base work. So depending how heavy you go on this bit depends on how heavy the effect is going to come out in the end, because what we're going to be doing is using our next colour to turn this from the sort of bony coloured earth into our main colour. So something like that. Very happy with that. And yeah, the heavier you go on this, the more of the effect you're going to get. The lighter you go on it, the less of the effect you're going to get. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our next colour, and that's going to be Ulthuan Grey. We're going to repeat the same steps we just did. I'm not going to wash the brush out because I still want the bristles to be dry, so we can get that dry brushing. If we were to make them wet, then we wouldn't be able to drag them across the base in the same manner. And also by doing this, when we work this colour in, you can see it on the tissue paper, it turns it this, it went from like a almost white to like an off yellow kind of colour. And that's going to give us a nice transition because it's pretty much mixing the Zandri Dust and the Ulthuan Grey together. So same technique, we're going to start off lighter. Just going to bring that across, and as you can see that's adding a lighter colour element to our base. Now how heavy you went on the original step, same thing applies to the second step. The heavier you go, the more of this effect you're going to create. So you can change the color of this to anything that you're happy with. And what we're going to get is we're going to get this kind of whitish yellow, almost like an earthy appeal, which is why I like to call these like natural bases. And why I like to use these bases a lot, I use them on things that I put in the store because they're like a natural tone. They go with pretty much any paint scheme, any army. Okay, so we're going to do that to that stage. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do Ulthuan Grey again, because as we've been working this off, you can see it in the paper now, it's getting like less yellowy, more white. You can see that coming off on my hand, coming off more of the actual colour of the Ulthuan Grey. We're going to give that another passing. And you can rinse and repeat this step as many times until you find a sort of like a happy medium with the bases that you want to achieve. So, like I said, this colour's at its purest is like an off-white colour, which is why after this step we're going to be using a pure white to achieve those final highlights, because it will just be that little bit brighter. So there we go. And like I said, with the original step, the harder you go with the Zandri dust, then the more you're going to get this main colour. Okay, so I'm going to be quite happy with that one. So after Ulthuan Grey, like I said, same thing with our third and final colour. Give that a shake. And we're going to be using the pure white. Now I haven't got my palette to hand, so what I'm going to do is, because we've been using the paper, I'm just going to put a little splodge. Don't need very much of this white at all, because the Ulthuan Grey is giving us our main colour, and the white is just basically like the final sort of nail in the coffin for our colour. Just needs a very little bit of this. And again, same thing applies. Be very light with this colour. Just catch those main bits. Give that a final passing with the white. And if this wasn't bright enough for you as a final highlight, just like we did with the Ulthuan Grey, we could get some more white, because you can see where it comes off in the paper, where we've still got the Zandri dust in the paper. Then all the colours almost make that natural blend together, and each time that you do this step it gets lighter and lighter. So once you've done this a few times, you get used to the medium that you're happy with, and I think we are very happy with that. Now this will look very different once you've got it on a base with a miniature, and your miniature takes away some of the colours, and we're going to add the tufts to it as well. Then you'll really get to see that effect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and wash off the brush, and then we're going to come back and do the final step to the painting. Alrighty, so there we are. We've got our base all dry brushed up. What I've done is I've just taken it out of the painting handle and stuck it on the edge, because unfortunately with the Games Workshop ones, once they're in here you can't get to the base rim. And what you can see, usually when they are spray painted, again we'll use Lurch as our example, they're spray painted, it's going to be changed to this sort of grey or whatever your undercoat was, whether that be white. And when you do the dry brushing or some of your painting even, you get some over bits on the edge. So all we're going to do quick is we're going to use that black paint we had earlier. I've got my palette from over here. Excuse the mess on the palette already. I was doing some painting up a inspiring champion of Khorne earlier, hence all the colours. So all we're going to do is, and I did forget to put this on the initial equipment list, so I'm sorry, but we're just going to use a standard size brush, and we are just going to paint the rim of our base. And again, this can be in any colour that you wish. Obviously this one will look a bit silly painting black on black, but usually, like I said, I'll undercoat mine into a grey. So yeah, all we're going to do is just neaten that all up, and we'll be back in just a second when that's all done. Alrighty, so we've painted our base, we've painted the rim to the base, it's looking very nice and neat now. We've got none of that sort of overlying paint onto the edges. So the last thing to do would be to add the tufts to the model. So as I showed earlier, I'm going to be using these Army Painter Winter Tufts. I really like the colours on these, so I'm going to pick a couple of those. I'm going to get probably like a small and a medium one. And not doing very well today, but we also need some super glue. Super glue, or you could use PVA glue, anything but basically like a plastic glue, because it won't take to the texture paint. But I'm going to be using super glue. I'd recommend super glue or PVA, but either one, your preference would be fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our Army Painted Tufts, and we're just going to take a couple off here. Let's get a small one, and let's grab a bigger one as well. And then what you would normally do is, if you had your miniature on here, so for example, if we use Lurch again, you would find a position in where you'd be happy to have the grass on the model before sticking it down, is what I'd recommend. Because obviously if you've got any sort of like scenic parts of your base, if they've got any rocks or anything that come with them, then you can choose sort of how you want them placed and how it will, you know, affect around the model, because you don't want to be covering up too many parts of the detail. So I'm just going to use super glue here, and because we're just doing a base as it is, we don't have to be too choosy. But all we're going to do is just put down just a little blob, nothing too much, tiny little blob, and then we're going to attach our tuff. Give it a little push down from the top just to make sure he's on there all okay. And we're going to put another one over here. Same thing again, a little bit of glue, a little bit of tuff. And there we go. For this example, actually, we're going to do a third one. Let's put another one on. Those two look a little lonely. I think we could do maybe a third one over here. Yeah, let's do a third one. Should have probably put them in more of a triangulated pattern. Maybe move these two over a bit. But for an example one, this isn't... It's almost hard to go off of when there's no model. And there we go. Now we should go the full hog and put a fourth one down, but I think we'll leave it just as the 3 for now. Oh, yeah. So there we go. There's our finished base ready for a miniature to go on there. Okay, so there we have it. This is our finished base. And as you can see, with our models here that we showed off at the beginning, it's the same sort of effect that you're going to be getting on these guys here. I'll put some photos up so you can see. But as you can see across all ranges of models, so we've got 40k, we've got this librarian here, and he's got the same palette with the tufts more spread out, and we have this Legolas here on a 25mm. It's got a couple of smaller tufts, and again, it's that same colours used, slight variation on the Legolas, I think, because I went slightly lighter, and this one's got a bit more of the Xandri dust on it. But again, like I said, when you're doing the dry brushing part, you can really change the colour of the bases if you want to. And just by doing it this way, you'll probably create some natural variation across your force, because it might not, like dry brushing any bases, come out exactly the same. And by mixing those colours, you're going to get more of a natural blend, but without it looking out of place, because it's still going to be in the same sort of ballpark and colour forte as the rest. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you. This is my first ever tutorial, proper tutorial, full length one on the channel. So I hope this format has been okay and enjoyable. Please leave any feedback in the comments below, because I'd love to hear them so I can improve it for the next time. So thank you very much for watching. As always, stay safe and happy wargaming. Psst. Hey you! Did you know that Lakey Wargames now has an official eBay store? You can buy yourself all kinds of pre-painted and new on sprue hobby goodness and support the channel at the same time. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Okay, see you in the next one.